Happy Sunday Seed Day. This is a new format for Sunday show. Occasionally, hopefully I'll do more. This is a little piece of Abundance Plus made available to the public, totally free for you guys. It's just a little taste of the glory.
Today we harvested a cow and a lamb on their home turf on the farm that they grew up on. It went really well because we had the farmer harvesting his own animal, and no one has a better understanding of the ends, the goal, than the farmer. And if you have those sorted out, then I think that you are the most qualified person to take the life of that animal. That's what Justin did. It was great. We were able to shoot the cow right in its paddock, really close to its herd, which is kind of exactly where they derive all of their peace from, all herding animals. They don't necessarily fear death like we do. They fear separation because they are bound to the herd. And so we harvest them in proximity to the herd, and then we got to take them over, do the skinning, evisceration, harvesting as much of the edible offal as we can. I mean, technically it's all edible, but we harvested the liver, the heart, spleen, caul fat, kidneys, and all of the internal body fat, which can be turned into tallow, which is super delicious. And then we split and quartered that cow, and it's in the cooler. And then we repeated that process with the sheep, which is basically just like doing a cow, only several degrees smaller. We did the slaughter with just a knife, restraining the sheep's body, because if you can control her body, you can control her mind, in an effort to make it as calm as possible. And just one cut with the knife, and the sheep bleeds out less than a minute. And then we skinned that, eviscerated, collected the offal again, and it's in the walk-in. So the larder is full. You have to be docile when you're slaughtering an animal. You have to be docile to that animal's nature. We have the luxury today where we have really adept mechanization. We almost have no limitations. So we can it means that we can harvest animals very thoughtlessly. Whereas if you limit yourself to simple tools and just execute a backyard slaughter, so you're just going to have simple tools, you have to be docile to the nature of the animal for things to go well, for things to proceed peacefully, humanely, and to get the full harvest. So you have to observe, you have to understand your animal, you have to have an intimate knowledge of it, of how it's put together, so that you can untie it, which is kind of what harvesting an animal is. It's like you're unknitting it into its constituent parts, but not by like throwing it into a blender or into a shredder. It's like literally unknitting a sweater strand by strand, in accord with how it was put together. You're just kind of taking it apart artfully. And when you do that, you maximize your yield. Which means you get the most food out of that animal. And you are particularly enabled to achieve a peaceful death. And so I slaughter every animal differently depending on their species, because they're all different. Pigs are extremely cerebral. They're as intelligent as canines. I mean, they can be house trained and everything. They're super intelligent animals because they're omnivores. So they need to be able to, they can eat everything. So they need to have a solid memory bank of what not to eat, in the case that it's poison. So with pigs, they're very intelligent. It makes the most sense to deliver death with a bullet to the brain. And you take out that highly intelligent, cerebral brain of theirs. And it's also not necessarily possible to physically manage a pig and to make it calm at the same time. Not going to happen. If you try to coerce a pig into a corner, or even try to hog tie it and manhandle it, that pig is extremely unhappy about the situation. They hate that. They will scream very loudly. And so it's ideal when you can just drop them even from outside of where they are. You don't even get in there, and you keep the excitement at a very low level. With sheep, on the other hand, they are not omnivores. They are distinctly a prey animal. their reaction is to any threat is to regard it as a predator and to flee. They don't have a plan B. It is always flee. And so you can actually control a sheep. Even you can control its energy. You can keep it calm by controlling its body. And so I don't shoot sheep in the head. You capture them and you lay them down on their side and you deliver death with the cut of a very sharp knife. And I would even say, for people that want to harvest sheep in their backyard, if you don't have a sharp knife, go with the gun if you're a better shot. Because a dull knife is just, you're going to saw on that neck forever and it's going to be horrible. It's a nightmare, so don't do that. It's got to be quick. And with sheep in particular, and goats, I would say that if you're going to maintain the peace, you need to have a calm buildup. The buildup to the slaughter is it's more vital than the actual delivery of the death blow. Because if they feel chased, then they will start running. And when they start running, then they will start panicking. Their attitude really follows what they're doing physically. And so it's really important to be able to corral them tightly so that they can't run. If you can herd them calmly into a barn stall or something, then they're contained. Then they can't run laps in an open field. And you can go in, and I even try to grab them with the first attempt. If you grab them and you miss, then they've gone from, a 2 to a 4 on the calmness scale. And each time you miss, they're just going to go up. And each time they get more anxious, they're going to be harder to kill peacefully. And so it's really, if you can control their body, you can control their mind. And for a lot of people harvesting animals for the first time, this feels violent because you are really controlling them. But it's helpful to know that in the case of harvesting animals, our paradigm for the way we act towards animals are pets. And so we tend to be very reticent and tender with our pets. But it is no kindness to an animal that you're going to kill for food to be reticent or to be hesitant. In fact, if anything, there's no such thing as overkill when you're going to kill an animal. And so be decisive and get the job done, which means you may actually have to put your emotional state to the side, which can be a sacrificial thing for you. If people tend to feel like they're executing a humane slaughter if they feel deeply about it. But I can't tell you, as someone who teaches people how to harvest animals for a living, more often than not, your feelings about it can cloud your intellect. So you won't be thinking very clearly because you're feeling intensely. All of that states, it does no favors to the animal. It's best to be docile to the nature of the animal, understand the way it works, so the nature of the animal, so that you can harvest it properly. And that's an act of your mind, of your intellect. A good example of that is I've had people, when they first learn to slaughter a chicken, they like to cradle it. They like to cradle the chicken as they're bringing it to like a killing cone or something. And it feels good to hold a chicken that way because that's how we hold babies or puppies. But that is not what a chicken appreciates. They will be tense. They'll be trying to get a wing out. They'll be vocalizing. If you want to calm a chicken down, you hold it upside down by its legs. And while that might not look tender, it is actually the best way to bring a peaceful state upon the chicken. That chicken is upside down. The blood is rushing to their head, which is kind of perfect for when you execute the kill. And they will submit. They're not flapping about. They're just kind of hanging out there. So you just got to be docile to the cues. If you have scruples about wanting to harvest properly, wanting to have the most humane kill, then you kind of have to intellectually assess the nature of that animal and understand it. And then you can kill it properly. Because even if it goes poorly, even if if you miss when you're using a gun, the last thing that you need and that pig needs in that moment is for you to be emotional about it. You need to take decisive action. And like in the case of a pig, it's helpful to be easy on yourself and to know that only them that shoots them can miss them. You're attempting to do something difficult, and so it's possible that it could go wrong. And that's just the risk you're taking on. If you want to guarantee that you never miss, then don't ever shoot. Just you don't attempt it. But you're attempting it. So it's helpful to know that if you shoot that pig, it might feel better. You might desire to try to send another bullet down to get the good shot. But now you have a moving target, and it's almost impossible to get a good shot. The pig is pacing back and forth. It's in pain. Maybe it's escaped. And so usually the best way and the quickest and the most humane way to end that pig is to just bleed them out with a knife and go right into the sticking. And it might feel brutal, but if you're going for what is best for the pig, what is the quickest death, then you might have to put aside that feeling and do what is needful in that moment. The slaughtering of animals is definitely a virtue, meaning it's a habit that you develop, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, which is kind of the definition of what a virtue is. A good habit that you can, that actually gets easier as you do it. And I would argue that it's not because you're becoming callous or unfeeling, or you don't care about the death of the animal. It's not that at all. It's because you understand what is the most important thing for that animal, which is a quick death. I wouldn't say it if it weren't verified by my experience. If you want to guarantee a slow, painful death of an animal, then pick the most compassionate person to deliver the kill. I think a lot of it is you don't want to think of yourself as violent too, because it's quite a weighty thing. It's a brazen assertion of the hierarchy of being. When you look at an animal and you say, yes, it is just for me to take your life so that I can sustain mine. That is an assertion that there is a hierarchy, that there is a natural order here, and that we have a particular role in it, and that animal has a particular role. And I think that because, we frequently get mixed up and we think that, well, we have no right to take an animal's life for our own. But really, that right is more of a burden, it's a responsibility. Because if we just were to let our livestock frolic wildly, let all of our cows go, they would all die of mastitis in a horrific, painful way, because they produce more milk than their calves can eat. If we let all of our sheep go and we never sheared them, they would be crushed under the weight of their own wool and suffocate and be eaten alive by maggots. It would be horrible. Animals that die of natural causes are those that suffer the most. That is the least humane way for an animal to die. And I know this because I've been called to be a knacker, which is basically when you go to a farm to dispose of an animal that's already almost there, almost dead, either because of old age or illness. And you'll dispose these animals that were on their way, you'll kill these animals that were on their way to a natural death. And you'll get inside them and you'll see their organs, and you'll realize they were dissolving from the inside out. Like they were just disintegrating. The pain must have been unimaginable. We actually have, because we have this ability and the need to eat meat, it is on us to ensure that the kill goes well. That's totally our responsibility. That is our burden. And I think that we can actually do this in such an artful way. We're actually fulfilling the nature of the animal. It's not like we're cutting it off. They are ordered towards sustaining us. And in exchange, we give them a grass. We give them a farm. We give them protection from predators. And they grow and thrive and multiply. And then we kill them quickly and without pain. And insofar as we are able. And that's sort of the order. That's the trade-off that we've made. And because they can't do that themselves, this is why we have to be docile to their nature. Because it's one thing, for a sheep just to be, you can extinguish its life. You can force a pig into into a trailer, you can drive it to a slaughterhouse, you can force it into another stall, and you can then kind of bind its body in a steel cage and deliver a kill with a captive bolt really quickly. But if you wanted to actually be docile to the nature of the pig, you wouldn't have to do all that coercion, all of that forcing that round pig into the square hole of the slaughterhouse. You can do it on your farm. And you can actually, when you're working with their nature and not against it, you can elevate their death. It's not just a bleed out when you cut a lamb. If they are calm and they're not resisting, you're actually killing them in a moment when they are not resisting their own death. You have done something on a whole different order. You have taken their death to the level of a sacrifice, insofar as they are able to cooperate with it, to give their life for our food, for us. It's because we have worked with their nature. That's on us to turn their death into a sacrifice. And we can only do that when we're docile to how they work, how they operate, and we slaughter them according to their nature. It's really remarkable when you see, when you properly submit a lamb because you didn't chase it for 2 hours around 5 acres, you don't have a dull knife, you properly submit the lamb and it's laying down. You can actually stand up and walk away and it will stay down because you're speaking the lamb's language. The lamb doesn't fear death immediately. It has instincts to react to things that lead to death. And that would be separation from the herd. That's like the number one. So they don't fear the sight of a dead lamb. They don't object to that on an existential level like we do as some injustice, because it's not unjust. They don't like being separated from the herd. Separation is death to a herding animal. So I will kill a lamb right there amidst its buddies. I'll kill a pig because pigs are also herding animals. They have sounders. I'll shoot it right next to all of the other pigs in the stall. That's how you maintain their calm. You have to have regard for their nature as herding animals. And when you do that, and you submit this lamb and it's laying down and it is not resisting at all because you haven't been excessively coercive. You've worked with its nature rather than against. It gets as close as it can to giving its life. And that is the highest thing any terrestrial can aspire to, is the gift of self, is to sacrifice. That's what slaughtering it in a peaceful way means, is you are allowing the animal to cooperate in its gift of self to us, that's as noble as it gets, I think. And that's on us. They won't do that automatically. We have to cooperate with them to do that. Part of that order that we assert every time we kill a chicken and eat it, we're asserting this order. Part of that difference between us and the animals we eat is that they will always fulfill their nature. A chicken will always do chicken things. They never disobey the rules. It's a huge misconception that animals are like just wild, random and wild. Like that is totally wrong. Just watch any BBC documentary or something, any documentary on nature, and you will see that there is an order to every wolf pack, to every coyote pack. There is an order to every herd of herbivores, such that even the way that they procreate, there will only be 2 animals in an entire pack of coyotes that procreates. Everybody else is celibate. Nobody else does it. And they never break the rules. They fulfill their nature because it's part of their form of how they were designed. And we can perceive that with our senses, and we can know it objectively. And which means that if an animal is ever doing something that is contrary to its nature, like living on slats of steel over its own waist and devouring the tails and ears of all the other pigs that it's with, that's because we have forced it. We have forced it to go contrary to its nature. We have forced the pig to act unpig-like. The pig's nature is to root, is to eat what's under the grass, and to eat the grass sometimes. not the tails and ears of other pigs. With us, though, we're different because we have the ability to choose. We have a different freedom than those animals. We can actually choose to fulfill our nature, or we can choose to go against it. We can actually be inhuman, right? A pig can never be unpiggish. It will always be piggish. And so the onus is on us, again, to not force these creatures that sustain us contrary to their nature. And I find that it's actually a similar error when we get into not wanting to eat meat. There's many reasons to not eat meat, to be a vegan or a vegetarian, but to assert that it is inherently and absolutely morally wrong to do so, that's an error, and it's based on not fulfilling your own nature as a human. That's going against the observable, objective nature of what it is to be a human being. And that's because we have the canines, and we have the diet, we have the small stomach, just like a pig, and it's muscular, and it's full of acid because it breaks down meat. That's what it's designed for. Pigs are omnivores too, so they can eat anything. We have very similar GI tracts to pigs. It's part of being docile to the natural order. And in that way, you can take on your responsibility to be a human in accord with your nature and ensure that the animals under your care are allowed to express their nature as they are designed. It's not just, abstract philosophy. If you do that, you will get a better yield. You will get a higher quality food with more nutrients. It will taste better. It will actually take less effort from you because you're not working against nature. You're working with it. And when I feel like urbanization is one thing that's permitted us to conceive of ourselves as something that exists outside of a natural order because we're surrounded by concrete and steel and glass. And our food is not something that we receive as a gift in exchange for us raising and caring for animals properly. Our food in a city is something we receive as an entitlement that we are owed for the money that we give for it. So unless you're consciously countering that mindset, you're going to be enslaved to your likes and dislikes with food. Whereas when you come out to a farm and you live with the animals and then you dare to harvest them, you realize that this is beyond your likes and dislikes, and that you can actually attain, even on the just purely flavor level, better flavors if you are more receptive and more docile to the nature of these animals and the nature of yourself. You're not a disembodied mind that costs nothing to the world to exist, which is kind of what the city allows you to believe if you let yourself go there in your brain. We all are humans. We are a burden. We have a cost in the natural order. Animals die to feed us. We can't even really escape that. That's kind of an illusion. The soy-based meat replacer stuff is the result of the death of millions of small creatures and the destruction of their habitat. So there's always death involved in the feeding of humans because there's always a cost to nutrition. So it's not so much that you are outside of the natural order, it's just that you're ignorant of it. And so when you come to a farmer, when you endeavor to slaughter your own animals, you're not doing something that is, it's a little sketchy, it's a little brazen, it's got a little bit of malevolence to it, or a little bit of moral, it has a moral shadiness to it. It's not that at all. It's just that you're encountering it for the first time. And before you were ignorant of it, even though your cost had never changed. You're still a weight. Militant vegans, they are morally outraged. Their argument is moral because they do not understand intellectually the hierarchy of being, the order to this. It's just like any domesticated livestock. We have this notion, and it's pretty much a 19th century notion of that wild is best. But that is predicated on the notion that we are not part of the natural order, that our domesticating, ordering tendency is not part of nature. It is, we're part of it. A wolf is out there in a very ordered pack fulfilling its nature. But a dog, when we think of like you have the wild dogs versus a domesticated dog, that dog through lots of selective breeding and then training, some dogs they have a vocabulary of like over 300 words. This is not a diminution of that dog's nature. We're not, hindering its real flowering in a wild context, running around scavenging food or whatever. That dog's nature is being fulfilled. It is looking up at you, and they look in your eyes because that is what their nature is ordered towards, cooperating with us, because that's the thing we do. We domesticate animals. Cows, bovines, their wild form has been extinct for centuries. They only exist as these domesticated animals now. And that's not contrary to their nature. This is the fulfillment of the aurochs that wandered Europe. They are the nursemaids of humanity. And this is a cooperation. And that's the way it works. The whole supposed nobility of the wild setting as being somehow morally superior can only be believed by someone who is ignorant of the wild setting. Death by predator is a completely different equation than death by my gun or my knife. They're not even on the same level. I get a lot of people in my classes, and one of the reasons they want to come is a good one. They want to see where their food comes from. And that's specifically how they'll articulate it. And I have to tell them, like, no, actually, this is not where your food comes from at all. This is a totally different thing. A pig or a lamb or a cow that's slaughtered in its own pasture, on its own home turf, knows nothing of the life of an animal that is slaughtered in the industrial slaughter mill, which is truly remarkable. I mean, these places do, and literally there's just 3 companies that are able to slaughter thousands of animals a day. So like 4,000 a day is a common number for a pig slaughter facility. And that's 90% of our pork supply. All those pigs go through that facility. And that facility is so mechanized that all the pigs have to be within 1% of slaughter weight to even go to the facility. Because everything is so designed around a particular physiological shape of every pig. They have to be exactly, 250 pounds, whatever it is, exactly. Or they won't fit through a lot of the machinery, through a lot of the slaughtering. So what this means is at these hog barns, you can't send a pig that's too big. And if the pig is not big enough, but it's been there too long, it doesn't have sufficient growth rate, you can't send that pig either. It's too small. And you also can't afford to keep it on because you have the next batch coming in. And so you euthanize all these pigs. And so literally every month, hundreds and hundreds of pigs are just incinerated because they don't fit the slaughter facility. So the slaughter facility is a huge bottleneck, and it's totally artless. It's the exact opposite of what we've been talking about. Whereas we're being docile to the nature of the pig, they have to force the pig to fit the machine, to fit the slaughterhouse. And that's why their genetics, they guard those pigs and they craft them so closely that their genetics are all the same. They're all sired by the same very small group of boars through artificial insemination, just so that their body shapes can be the same. And that slaughterhouse produces meat that is trimmed of all of its skin and fat, and it goes to the supermarkets basically just lean and boneless, and then it's cut into steaks at the supermarket. And you're only getting a fraction of what is edible on those pigs, like a minute fraction. You never see trotters, hocks, tails, heads in a butcher shop. Sometimes you might see picnic shoulder, sometimes Boston butt. It's not, we can't lay all the blame on an industrial slaughter system that is so damaging, not just to the pigs and to the animals, because they're transported for miles, they're prodded, they're electrified out into trucks and out of trucks and in a line, and they're slaughtered by machines and they're pushed along, which is huge for pigs because they have a major reticence about different textures of ground. And so if you need to load a pig in a trailer, like, you need to make where they are and the ramp and the bed of the trailer all look the same. Same texture. So put hay all across it. If you're going to try to force a pig onto a wood ramp from, deep bedding, they're not into that. They do not get that at all. They need similar texture. And that's all they experience in a slaughterhouse setting. Just forced, pushed, prodded. As bad as that is, and as bad as, what a hog barn does to the land, what a feedlot for cows does to the land, which is deprive the land of a ruminant, the management of which can actually increase and build topsoil and increase the fertility of the soil. We've taken them off the soil into a centralized feedlot where we grow corn and soy in monocrops, just stripping the soil of all its nutrients, and then we feed that to the cows. And then they create lagoons of their own waste that are too nitrogenous and acidic, and they just fester and rot when they could be going back to fertilize the fields that they graze. So it's an environmental blight. There could be nothing more counter to the natural order than a feedlot for cows. It takes them off the grass and destroys any fertility they could bring to it. It's horrible. Anyway, with all of those abuses of the industrial system, ultimately, it is to produce meat that is cheap and lean, because that's what we want to cook. So again, it's on us. And this is why when I started butchery, I didn't really start butchery. I started cooking. And then I worked backwards from how I know to cook each cut back to the live animal. Because the end is the cookery. You can raise a pig in your backyard and you can slaughter it. And that's wonderful. But if you don't know how to cook it, you're probably not likely to do it again. You're going to regard 70% of that pig as waste because there's so much there that you don't know how to cook. It's just lack of culinary ability. I always say that the thing about butchery is that the thing is not about butchery. It's about cooking. Learn how to braise, pan fry, and roast, and start doing it well. And then you'll be motivated to make your four-legged beast fit in your pots, your pans, and your ovens for braising, pan frying, and roasting. And then you have unlocked the telos of why we farm at all, and it's to feed people. What ingratitude it would be to raise a pig, slaughter it, and cook it poorly, and just burn it. It's really important to learn how to cook. And that will inform everything you do before, because that's the end. And when you get the end sorted out, the means will fall into place and they'll make sense. Don't be intimidated by how professional slaughtermen do it. Don't be intimidated by the poster of perfect butcher cuts with all, they're all denuded and they're spherical or geometric shapes, which those don't exist on animals, right? There's a few spheres, but it's all this denuded geometric like meat architecture on a poster with names for each one. It's like that is useless to the home cook. I would rather have a good home cook butcher my pig than an experienced conventional butcher, because she knows where it's going to go. And even if you take a hunk of meat off the shoulder and you cook it and you can't quite remember what that cut was called or maybe even necessarily where it came from, but it tasted well after you cooked it, then you butchered it properly. It's really on us. We have lean, cheap, you get what you pay for, meat in the grocery stores because that's what we have wanted for a long time. So that's what we got. And so there's only so much blame we can lay on the industrial slaughter system, which is more or less responding to our demand, what we want.
If you liked what you saw and you liked Brandon, well, I've got really good news for you. We've got so much more of him. He's in our Rooted 7 show, which goes into interviews with me, the beautiful one, Brandon. We just dig so deep into the beauty of your own animal harvest on farm. It's absolutely amazing. We also, for those of you who want to get really down and dirty, we have 2 master classes now with Brandon on how to do the on-farm butchery, how to process that sheep and get it ready for the butcher. I mean, that's kill, that's gut, that's skin. Same thing for the beef. So on-farm beef and sheep, I guess technically it would be a slaughter. It's not necessarily the butcher. I think that's breaking it down. But this does the most, it teaches you how to do it in the most humane way. It's on-farm. Thought a bee was on me. It's on-farm. The animal is in its environment, hasn't had to be transported. There's no stress involved, so it doesn't affect the meat. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's filmed on cinematic camera, so it's a joy to watch. That is all available in Abundance Plus. Link for that down in the description, or you can just go to abundanceplus.com.